Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Gillette, and here with me is
Omar Pozos. What's up, everybody? How are you guys doing?
Well, currently, I am a little bit stressed, not going to lie, because, we're recording this on Tuesday, so the Tuesday before this actually comes out on that Monday. So in this moment right now, we are prepping for a hurricane that's supposed to be hitting Thursday morning early, but we're going to actually start getting tropical storm winds this afternoon. So we are getting a quick little podcast episode in before we pack up and go evacuate over to my sister's.
Yeah, so this is pre-Hurricane Ian. I'm a little nervous. I don't know really what to expect. So, prayers to everybody out there, and I hope that this storm isn't as bad as what it's predicted, but we'll take it day by day, and like we said the other day, hope for the worst and
hope for the worst.
Hope for the best and
expect the worst.
The worst. That's what it is.
Yes. We're not hoping for the worst.
No, backwards.
But yep, if you're listening to this episode, then hopefully we already made it through it, and hopefully it did not actually turn out to be as bad as it's looking right now.
Yep.
But today we're just going to answer some of your fat loss questions. So, I love getting questions from our listeners and just anybody in general, anytime on Instagram where, we get a lot of DMs with different just questions asking for support, different things. And I love to answer that. And so, we did get a message recently with a lot of really good questions in it. And I turned to Omar and I was like, we're going to make this a podcast episode because I think other people probably have some of these questions too, especially when they start diving into our free resources in our Facebook group. They start to make some headway on their own. And inevitably, when you start to make a little bit of progress, new challenges come up, and that's where ultimately you end up having some questions. And we want to be able to support you through that.
Yeah. And honestly, I think these are great questions. And one thing, I've been very fortunate and lucky to have a coach that can kind of guides me through all this and tells me exactly what to do. But before we kind of dive in, and Vanessa, I'm sure you'll agree, but I kind of just want to put a disclaimer out there that, when it comes to weight loss, when it comes to fitness journey, it's not a one size fits all. So what we're going to give, and really Vanessa, is just general advice, tips, and ideas of generally what you could expect. But of course, like you said, because this is so individualized, your body can respond to it differently based on whatever your goals are, your dieting history. So take that, and just kind of listen to the rest of the episode, but take that with with an idea that, your body is very different from anybody else's.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive into it. I have not prepared any answers for these. I just kind of glanced at them before the podcast. So if you want to maybe ask away, Omar, and we can just kind of have a conversation, dive in and talk about really answering the questions.
Yeah, let's do it. So we'll do like kind of interview style today. And then I'll just ask you some questions and go from there. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Cool. So yeah, this person that we were chatting with, she says, you have referred to your diet phase as your cut phase. I've seen your videos on what a cut phase should look like. So for me, my plan is doing, about 2,000 calories. From here, she breaks it down and says, I'm doing 175 grams of protein, 175 grams of carbs, and 67 grams of fat. I have a few questions, she says, but before I start, I want to lose at least 50 pounds, probably more. So question number one is, how long do you cut at a time?
Yeah, so that's a really good question when it comes to how long should a cut phase actually last. And she made a great point there of saying, sometimes I refer to it as a cut phase, sometimes I say a diet, sometimes I say a fat loss phase. These things are all interchangeable. My preferred title is fat loss phase, and that's typically what we call it when we are talking with our clients. But you'll hear it across the industry referred to as different things. I don't really like the word diet, so I typically veer away from that and only use it sparingly when I just want to make sure I get a point across, and people tend to understand the word diet the best. But for this person who, she said she wants to lose at least 50 pounds. That's a pretty hefty weight loss goal at the end of the day. It didn't take you 6 months to gain 50 pounds, so it's not going to necessarily be feasible always to lose 50 pounds in 6 months. A lot of times we have to take that step back and remember that, it takes time to gain weight. So it's probably going to take time to lose weight if we're doing it in a healthy way. And especially if we want it to be sustainable, because things that happen fast tend to also have the repercussions of losing our results fast. Slower progress ends up being more sustainable progress in the long run, typically. So
And just out of curiosity, Vanessa, when you say sustainable, like what do you mean by that? Is it mainly that because it's taken a little bit longer, you can perhaps be in a caloric deficit, in a smaller amounts, or like what do you mean by sustainability there?
Sustainable meaning like the results after you've achieved your goal, being able to sustain those results and not regain the weight is really what I'm referring to.
Got it. So it's more long-term results with losing the weight and keeping it off for good kind of
exactly.
thing. Got it.
So literally with this question of like how long should a cut phase last or a fat loss phase last, I hate to say it, but the answer is it depends, because it depends on every individual. Their body's going to respond differently. So some people can stay in a fat loss phase a little bit on the longer side, and their body can respond to it and continue to see progress without having any repercussions. Most people, however, tend to cap out around that 6 month or so mark. Some people can go upwards of 9 months. I never really see it looking good for people that are in a fat loss phase for a year plus. And I know that there are people out there that will say, well, I started to lose weight and that was like 2 years ago and I've just been losing weight really ever since. The issue with those people, and while I commend them for their weight loss results, it's fantastic, really, and it's hard work. It's really incredible. But a lot of times what I see happen with those women is they get results, they see the progress, they keep going because they're excited. But as you are starting to lose weight, your body is starting to respond, because our bodies are essentially, at the end of the day, survival machines. And we can't just get smaller and smaller and smaller until we just like disappear into nothingness. We have an endpoint where our body is going to say, whoa, okay, like we can't keep losing weight, especially not at this speed. So how does your body prevent that from happening? It slows your metabolism down. So whereas before, maybe you were eating 2,000 calories and you were losing weight and you were seeing progress and things were good. And then eventually, you stopped losing weight. So you said, okay, I'm just going to eat less. Now I'm going to eat 1,700 calories, and you're seeing a little bit more progress. And then again, you stop seeing progress because now your body's adapted. Now you are maintaining at 1,700 calories. You're no longer able to lose weight at that amount. So then they cut calories again. They might cut down to, 1,400, and they start to go through this cycle of just continuing to cut their calories until they get down to 1,000 calories, and they're not even, again, their body adapts to that, and then they're no longer seeing results. So now they feel hungry, yet they aren't losing weight. They start to have the negative repercussions that we know come from under eating for an extended period of time, such as hormonal dysfunction, such as just internal stress in the body, a lot of digestive distress, a lot of different things that tend to happen.
Bad relationship with food.
Oh, bad relationship with food. I see a lot of binge eating start to develop from this. So at the end of the day, it's not worth it to keep pushing yourself to that point. The way that we like to go about things is, of course, monitoring our clients' progress on a weekly basis at minimum. We're typically checking in on our clients on almost a daily basis, really seeing how we're doing, really talking with them, talking about our relationship with food, and we're monitoring tons and tons of both qualitative and quantitative data to know where a client is and like where they should be in relation to their goals, as far as, is it time that maybe we take a diet break? We pull up and we eat more calories for a little while and let our metabolism kind of reset a little bit. Is it time to just, maybe we haven't quite hit our end goal of 50 pounds, but maybe we've lost 25, and it's time that we just reverse up, eat more food, maintain for a while, and make sure that we can maintain that 25 pounds of loss before we ask our body to start losing that next 25 pounds. And that's how you make it sustainable. So you don't just lose the 50 pounds over a year, 2 years, and then just regain it back and more in the following years, and then find yourself 5 years later looking and feeling worse than you did at the very beginning of your journey. But instead, you take it one step at a time. You are patient, and you just understand the fact that your health and your relationship with food, your mental health, that matters more than fast progress does. So yes, fast progress is actually sometimes slower progress when you think of the timeline.
Yeah, and I love that. And honestly, I love that perspective, because when it comes to, fat loss or weight loss, there's so much more than just like there's just so much more to just weight loss in itself, meaning like there's a mental aspect of it that nobody really stops to consider. But you're right, when you're in a weight loss phase, there's a lot of stress going on. And if for some reason you have, a busy job or kids and you're trying to navigate all that, at times it could be more beneficial, like you said, to take a pause for a week or so or 2 weeks and keep moving forward, right? After the fact.
Exactly.
So number 2, and you kind of already touched on this, but it says when your body gets used to your cut calories, do you cut more? If so, how much?
So this really does depend on where you kind of started from. So this is why with our clients, we always like to, and I say always kind of loosely, everybody, it is very individual. It's very, very much customized, our approach. But with most people, we like to really start with making sure our metabolism is in a good spot, making sure that we know where our body maintains at, where our body is healthiest at, where our hormones are healthiest at, and have that kind of set point so that we can know, okay, if I maintain at 2,400 calories, then now I know when it's time for me to really start my fat loss phase, which of course we typically see a good bit of fat loss, just recomposition during that really resetting of the metabolism phase. But as we enter our fat loss phase, now we can know, okay, my kind of set point for my maintenance, where I maintain at, is, for this example, let's say 2,400 calories. So maybe I'm going to start by eating 2,100 calories. Maybe I cut 300 calories down, and I might see a good bit of sustainable weight loss coming from that. I'm not overly hungry. I still have plenty of calories to pull from. But because we did this thing right, we started nice and high. We made sure that we could really get our peak with our metabolism at that 2,400 mark. Now we're able to lose weight on 2,100. So it's feasible to still actually cut a little bit more off if our body stops responding and if our biofeedback is still good.
Yeah.
And so really what I mean by that is, again, we're monitoring a lot of things. If you are no longer responding to that cut calories, let's, for this example, 2,100, you're no longer seeing weight loss, but you're also starting to feel restricted. You're hungry. Maybe you're starting to like binge a little bit here and there. Maybe you're just feeling more tired. You're just like, maybe there's more stress in your life. So just some things have changed. If all of this stuff is going on, then we might say, you know what? Our body's not responding at this point. Let's go back up to 2,400 for a little bit. Let our body kind of rest, reset a little bit, like feel at ease that we're not trying to lose weight. And then we'll go back down to that 2,100 and we'll probably see results from that.
Yeah. Funny you say that. I kind of went through that in my last, cut phase that I just had, where I started noticing that I was a little more irritable than I normally am. I'm not that I'm irritable now. Well, sometimes. And then that was the other thing where I started to like catch myself trying to maybe do a little binge eating or trying to overeat and compensate there. So I kind of talked to my coach at the time and I was like, hey, I think it might be time for me to kind of pull out of the fat loss phase or the cut phase because it's just not worth it to me. So let's take a break and then kind of continue on there.
Exactly.
And to your point, Vanessa, and we've said this before, but it's that analogy of almost like building a home, right? And like you said, first working on perhaps restoring your hormones, restoring your metabolism, and building that strong foundation so that when you dive into the fat loss or the cut phase, whatever you want to name it, you can have your body can be ready for that and expect much better results. And at the end of the day, with long-term effects on it, right? And no pun intended, but in the event that you have like hurricanes or something or bad storms on that home, you hope that, it can sustain all of these, crazy severe weather, or, you hope that your body can sustain all of the external stress or whatever life might throw at it kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a very timely analogy right now, but
Yeah.
It is a great analogy for this because that's the thing. When we are asking our body to lose fat, we're essentially stripping parts of the body away to where it is stressful in the body. Like, yes, in many cases, not all cases, it can be healthier to lose the body fat, but it's still asking our body to change. And change on the body can be stressful. And especially when essentially we're taking away resources. We're no longer providing our body with energy, with as much food as we normally have. And our body is going to adapt to that by having a little bit of that internal stress because it is having to release that energy store, the body fat, in order to replace what is not being eaten.
Yeah.
We're having lower calories. And that's hard on the body. So now if there are things outside of you that are just causing other forms of stress, then if you just cut too hard, you cut your calories way down, you're feeling impatient, you stop responding, you're like, I'm just going to go lower, that could end up resulting in your body being like in that shaky position, like a house, to where now that, hurricane comes in and now it can't withstand that. So if there's a bunch of life stress being the hurricane, you might not be in a good position, and that can result in things like hormone issues.
Yeah, which then leads to a whole nother rabbit hole.
Way issues, more problems, which is going to delay your progress much longer anyway.
Yeah. So next one is going to be, this girl says, I know, Vanessa, that you up your step count to about 10,000 steps per day. Do you also up your strength training?
Yeah, so I believe she's talking about when it comes to a cut phase, a lot of people will increase their step count. She's asking, do we also increase our strength training? So the answer to that is typically no. When it comes to the steps, the reason that we do that is because we want to essentially be able to increase our calorie burn, our calorie expenditure, so that we don't have to cut down as much of the calories we're eating. Because at the end of the day, it's really just like a seesaw. What is the word I'm looking for? Not a seesaw. Is it a seesaw?
I think so. Yeah.
Couldn't think of the right word there. Yeah. So it's like a seesaw. We need to find that balance, because if we're lowering one side of it, we're letting one side of that scale go down of, we're eating less calories. And on the other side, we're increasing our calorie burn. Then there's just going to be a bigger difference there to where that's going to be the body fat that we're losing. If we're not increasing our activity levels, we're not increasing our calorie burn, then we have to cut more away from our food to be able to create that gap to be able to burn body fat. But a lot of people get confused where they think any form of exercise is going to be helpful in terms of increasing our calorie burn. But that's not necessarily true, because we also have to consider the other things that happen when we increase our exercise. And so when we add in things like strength training, like more high intensity cardio, these types of things, they are also a little bit stressful in the body in a good way, typically, especially when we're talking about strength training. It's a good stress in the body. It's a stimulus that causes you to get stronger, to actually build more muscle, which in the long run will actually help with your results. But if we do too much of it, then essentially we end up in like this recovery deficit where we no longer can recover as well, because we aren't giving our body enough of the resources, enough of the nutrients to be able to initiate that recovery process. So to really kind of wrap up answering that question, we increase our steps because it's a very gentle way of increasing our activity level. So that's typically why if someone is, prior to the cut phase, prior to the fat loss phase, if they're walking, 7,000 steps on average, then we might say, hey, our goal is now to be hitting 10,000 steps a day. For some people, they're already hitting 10,000. In some instances, we might even bump that up a little bit. Let's say we're going to go to 12,000 a day, because that little bit of extra walking, extra movement can actually go a really long way. With our strength training, ideally, we're going into our fat loss phase having already established a really strong metabolism, which includes typically getting consistent with strength training. So we're not going to actually add more strength training when we decrease calories, because again, we're not going to be in the best state to actually recover from that training, and it could end up having detrimental effects such as injuries, such as just being really tired all the time, being under recovered, and just not really seeing the progress that we want to see from our strength training itself.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of injuries, next question, she says, I have weaker ankles. Could I do a low intensity ride on a recumbent bike, which I'm not sure what that, I think it's like a stationary bike, right? Yeah. Instead of walking more? And if so, how much time would you suggest?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question to ask. We actually have a lot of clients that do that, where if we do work with clients that have various injuries, have had like knee replacements, surgeries, different things. A lot of times we have clients start with us right after they've had a surgery, because they know the value of working on their nutrition during that phase with helping them recover. But that aside, when it comes to this kind of instance where maybe, you're hearing that you need to increase your steps to be able to help with your fat loss, but you're thinking, I can't physically walk that much because it's actually really hard on my body. I have weak knees. In that instance, absolutely get on a stationary bike, some form of bike like that. Really, really good, low impact way to get that form of low intensity movement. Because at the end of the day, what we're looking for is any type of way of moving our body, but keeping our heart rate in a lower zone. So really keeping your heart rate under, it does vary per person, but I'm going to say like blanket statement, probably under like 110 beats per minute. But even then, for a lot of people, just keeping it lower, keeping it low intensity, helping aid in stress relief is really, really effective as well. At the end of the day, it's just about getting movement in.
Yeah.
And I think she asked as well, how much time would I suggest as far as replacing the steps with the time on the bike? You can think of it as like 10 minutes of just like kind of low intensity movement on the bike is going to be equivalent to about, I'm doing this off the top of my head. I'm not prepared for this. And I know I did the calculation once, and I believe it was 1,000 steps was about 10 minutes on the bike.
That sounds about right, because I think like 1 mile is like 1,600 steps or something like that. But it kind of correlates to about 10 minutes to every 1,000
And it doesn't have to be a perfect exchange anyway. Again, at the end of the day, it's about movement.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. And on top of that, Vanessa, and I'm glad you mentioned that, we actually have worked with people that have recently undergone surgeries and stuff like that, because one of the things that I always like to mention is that, that's part of the reason why we do have a movement specialist on our staff, so that he can help them really see how their body moves or where they might have some of those weak joints that might need strengthening, and essentially position their strength training program to help them recover faster and more efficiently, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But that was it. That was all the questions that we had for you. So thank you for
that was fun. So
letting us pick your brain.
Sending us questions, guys. Really enjoyed doing that. And it makes our job easier because I don't really have to prepare for the podcast as much. Just kind of giving you answers on a whim. But I hope that our next few days go well, because if you're listening to this podcast, hopefully everything is well. So you'll probably find out from our social media. But keep us busy by just sending us questions, because I figure we're at least going to have, hopefully, service to where I'm going to be chatting with you guys on Instagram. So that is all for this week. We will be back next week. Thank you so much for listening.
See you guys.